Okay, so today's lecture, second in the course, labeled 01 slides, is about information technology in the life sciences. Okay, so today I would like to talk a little bit about moving computer systems away from traditional approaches to more modern strategies and some of the benefits and challenges of that. I'll talk a little bit more in depth about cloud computing, a very important concept in our society these days. And then I'll describe what my lab's infrastructure looks like, and then end discussing moving discussion away from hardware and towards more software and other resources for uh, information management in the life sciences and some things that you may benefit from. Okay, so I think that all of us understand concepts of laptop and workstations. Um, Usually the workstation is slightly more powerful than the laptop. Maybe some of you are less familiar with the concept of a server, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a bit. So then I would measure each of these three levels of computing prowess, I guess, in terms of processors, memory disk, AV, and backups. So processors, typically CPUs, but not necessarily CPUs anymore these days, are really, you can consider them the engine of the computer. So speed is the rate that they can execute instructions. And therefore, if you need a lot more processing power, you have basically two alternatives. Buy fancier CPUs that are faster, or buy more CPUs and try to distribute out your problem across those CPUs. Memory refers to what is the capability of your system to store program and data that that program needs while it's being executed on the processors. So if you use Microsoft Excel, for example, a spreadsheet, then the software that's in RAM is is the Microsoft Excel itself, and your financial data or whatever you're working on is the data in um, the worksheet, and it's also in RAM. And basically, then that information is shuttling to and from the processors as it's being executed. And if you have really big software or really big data sets, then you just need to buy more memory. Disk, for example, usually refers to what you guys all know, which is a small thing in your computer that it has super fast access to and from memory. It's where you store things in the long-term way, when you shut down the computer, etc. You don't want all of your programs in RAM forever. You want to basically save those to a more permanent place. Um, but compared to random access memory or other types of memory inside the computer, that input output, the time it takes to go from the disk to the CPU is very, very slow. Okay. And then we have things like audio visual. So classically, that's monitors, but we're going to talk about some fancier things today too. And then finally, we have backup, which refers to how you store data in the long term. So it's sometimes called cold storage because it's not always accessible online. Sometimes it actually takes a system administrator to go in and actually install the drive into the working system to access that data. And this is typically for very, very large files or complete operating systems, or you take your whole laptop and store it in case something bad happens to your machine. Okay, so I just asked for a second that you all reflect on what your backup strategy is right now. I know that many professors, for example, haven't been going into Concordia because of COVID-19. And so their backup strategy of their laptops, etc., is basically to use the Wi-Fi, the intranet of Concordia, to automatically back up in the background. But that hasn't been happening for a long time now. So if you don't have a backup strategy for your data, you should consider it. And there's some ideas in here that are quite good. Okay, So I'll point out here that I've said things like medium high, very high, and this null symbol. So what I mean is that traditionally we don't expect too much from our laptops, except they should probably have good audio visual, right? Because I think if you're like me, you probably watch, use your laptops for um, uh, media, social media, YouTube, etc. So um, you want to be able to see high resolution images, etc. You have less interest in having, you don't usually use a laptop for big computational processes and big data files. Uh, I should say that I think I'm quite accustomed to what it means to have big computational demands and big computational um, uh, uh, data sets or large data sets. And it's not at all given that you have that experience. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today too. Why sometimes you need uh, really a large amount of computing power. Here I've written the null, meaning that backup, we don't really use our laptops for backup. We don't really use our workstations for backup that much either. Usually we rely on some external larger server for backup. And I think traditional labs, you would back up your laptop and workstation regularly to the server. Nowadays, it's probably done by software in the background. Your workstations, you do probably demand higher processors, memory, and disk, and high audiovisual because, well, certainly for personal uses like gaming, you need all four objects. You need good workstations. Um, in research settings, when you're doing modeling and video editing, etc., you need a good amount of power to do that. The servers are usually not something people have at home. It's usually more about companies and academic labs. There we go from say having 4 or 8 processors on a workstation to let's say 200 CPUs on a server that we can submit large computational jobs to. Similarly, whereas a laptop might have, 500 gigs of RAM, that would be very large, I think, or a workstation. I think a terabyte would be extremely large still to this day of RAM. Servers like our server in the basement of GE might have 1 or 2 terabytes of RAM. This space, well, I guess it's not uncommon anymore for a laptop to have a terabyte. Workstations might have a few terabytes, and servers might have 500 terabytes. And that's part of the reason is because the server is also serving as your backup strategy. So you need that power. But we don't expect any kind of like video or um, uh, high resolution monitors associated with servers. That's usually done by downloading to your workstations and laptops. Okay, so that I think um, kind of spells out what a traditional lab might look like in terms of computing power. So a lot of your money goes into the server. Workstations are very important. Laptops, you don't need super high power, but they still cost some money for ones that have good audiovisual capabilities. Okay, I should say too that servers here, I mean, typically ones that are local to the company or to the lab, things like ours that's in the basement of GE. Okay, so I'd like to reflect on a few points here. Um, so you imagine you own a company or ran a lab, and at times uh, you might have a project that requires a lot of modeling and video and simulation, or it's analyzing large genetic data sets. And so you'll need a lot of computational resources. And so you'll run down to the iStore and buy a bunch of disks or CPUs and jam them into your server. And when that project ends, well, do you need that equipment anymore? But of course, you still have it. And it's not very easy to sell these things back. Uh, So The cost of your project has to consider the cost of that equipment, which can be substantial. Hardware, as all of you know, I think we all know, goes out of date quickly. Operatings and the software that run on it change, and that eventually, it won't work anymore. You won't be able to upgrade to more modern operating systems, and that's usually the sign that it's on its last leg. And it costs money to replace that equipment, so that's something that's substantial. And as systems age, errors and systems fail. So, for example, our system at McGill had about 200 and something drives, and at the end of its life cycle, we were losing about one drive every month. Now, mind you, like the cost of a drive itself, that's not the main problem. The cost of the labor, so the system administrator that has to go in and spend time, well, maybe an hour driving into the site, changing the hard drive, rebooting the system, and driving home. We pay for that, and so that can far exceed the cost of the part itself. And then actually all of you can consider this, I think, is, how much does your laptop get used per day? How much does your workstation get used? And we might think a lot, but I still sleep at night, so it's down. It's definitely not being used more than half a day. So um, when you think, if you're in a company and you want to save money, and you think that, well, we invested $1 million into this computing system, but it sits there idle 60, 70% of the time, and it's still becoming obsolete. Excuse me. Um, you know, it's a lost potential, right? And actually, I think studies by the government and granting agencies, et cetera, that we deal with have found that the vast majority of computing equipment is really underutilized. It might be only used 5% for 5% of its capacity over its lifespan. And that's, of course, not optimal. And then, um, similarly to replacing a failed component, uh, updating software and operating systems costs money, and it can be challenging. It's not always easy to upgrade and to repurchase the software, but again, the labor can be quite uh, quite expensive. And as you guys know, and I think the problems these days, it's becoming pretty good, I think. You consider, how does your phone integrate with your laptop and integrate with your workstation and your backup strategy? What about Alexa and Siri, Home Assistants, Next systems for your home, all other sort of computer gadgets in the Internet of Things? How well can you share files and information between those systems? I know as a researcher who's used to working on a laptop, uh, moving over to the server when I need more computing power, it can be cumbersome because I have to then transfer those files over to the server. It's not seamless. It's not all one system, and it's it's inconvenient. But things that are inconvenient tend not to get done. It's not again. Um, it has to do with, are you using your system optimally? Okay, and this I'd like you to think about, and there's a bit of work to be done here on the assignment in this direction. Um, but I'd like you to reflect on how computerized are you in your day-to-day work life. Um, so if you're in a lab right now, how is inventory handled? So ordering, invoicing, purchasing, the delivery, tracking expiry dates, tracking how much of that reagent, that buffer, that kit, um, these kinds of things, and more. How are you doing that now? And how is your PI doing that? We have our system that we've tried to optimize, and I'll talk a little bit about it later. But it's a challenge, especially as your lab or your company gets larger. What about lab notebooks? So undergrad or grad student, you guys all have lab notebooks, and many of you probably still use old pen and paper approaches. So I will present, we'll talk some alternatives today uh, for you to think about and consider incorporating into your life. Um, what about intellectual property in your group or your company? How do you share talks and posters, data sets, figures, code that's written by your colleagues, and messages, all these kinds of things? How do you communicate day to day inside of your group? And how much of that is computerized in an intelligent way that actually helps you get your job done and further your research? Okay, so all of those issues sort of motivate moving towards a more modern computational approach. And I'll describe a little bit what we did over many years. And I'll point out here that I'm not trying to sell any one system, right? I ask for an open mind, but I don't claim that any solution I give you here is optimal. I don't even know if they're optimal for our lab. I'm totally happy to hear about alternatives. I'm totally um, happy to have a discussion about alternative strategies. Um, I show you what we've done, and as food for thought for you guys, whether you're an undergrad or grad or working in a genome center or a company, um, these are the things that you should be thinking about. And um, you know, I'll just end by saying that at this stage in your career, having the skill to maintain modernity, right, to change quickly and incorporate technology into your day-to-day life is, I would think, very valuable. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm sure psychologists have studied why some people do not easily take new technology um, quickly, and others do. Uh, I think I can guess at what some of those reasons are, and I certainly, from my own personal experience, but maintaining an open mind for new ways of doing things is really important, especially in this day and age when things move so fast. Okay, so here's a more modern lab setup that developed over the years where I think the first thing that happened was that our personal phones around maybe 2010 started to really play a role in our day-to-day research. The second thing is this concept of a compute farm that I'll talk a little bit before. But these things in here, I think at first remain basically the same. Okay, so what is a compute farm? Okay, there's some companies, Google Cloud, Apple Cloud, Google, um, sorry, Amazon AWS or Microsoft Azure. These are companies that offer processors, storage, and backup virtually. So you can basically buy as much power as you want as long as you can afford it. And then via the internet, you can pass your information to and from. So, well, then, okay, so right off the top, when you have a compute farm, that's going to basically probably affect the need for a server to some extent. Okay. Cell phones, here's one example of how they've been integrated in our lab. We recently started this SNIPE-T. SNIPE-T is pretty cool. It can generate QR, which are these two-dimensional barcodes or classic barcodes. And you basically generate them on the fly. And you print them out on a normal printer, but on special sticky paper. So you have stickers, okay? And you know, you can buy the paper and ink that survives autoclaving -80s. And then you basically use these stickers on every item in the lab. So, you know, everything from a bottle of reagents to a kit to a laptop to a grad student. And that label then basically is associated with an entry in the database that describes when it was purchased, its expiry date, its cost, etc., where it is, you know, all sorts of information like that, how much, and then you can use our camera, like just the phone on our camera is good enough, reads the barcode, and you'll see that it just basically pops up a link on your phone. You click on that link, and suddenly you're inside of the spreadsheet that we use for invoicing and tracking. Okay, you can try this on this example here. So if you hold up your iPhone to any one of these QR codes, you'll see that a link to a database entry on Google Sheets appears. And if you click on that link, you'll go to our toy example of a inventory list. So this system has been working great, and it's used. What's really important is that we deal with samples from our collaborators, whether they're human samples, so they could be, breast tissue, tumor tissue from a woman with breast cancer. It could be cell lines from our collaborating lab. It could be all sorts of expensive Mohs xenograph data uh, sample, etc. Stuff that you really don't want to lose for ethical um, and cost reasons. So we label everything right down to the smallest Eppendorf with these barcodes, and it helps to keep everything straight and less chance that we mix up or lose samples. Okay, so then what we observed in our lab was that tablets, what I call tablets plus, started to kind of work their way into our day-to-day life. So by that, I don't just mean an iPad. I also mean things like voice-activated assistants like Siri or Alexa. Also, the styli for laptops, the one stylus, multiple styli. Um, they've become really important. I love my stylus for my iPad. I use it all the time, and I make a lot of notes with my iPad that way. So here's two examples of how it's been used in our lab. First, lab notebooks. So again, I want to keep going back to lab notebooks, and you'll know that you'll remember that the required reading gave you two short papers from Science and Nature discussing modern lab notebooks and some of the challenges there. I hope that you've read them and considered that information already. Um, so uh, of course, you know, getting information from a pen and paper lab book into uh, electronic format um, is not particularly challenging per se, but it's time consuming. So, anything that's time consuming or inconvenient tends not to get done. Now, in a company or academic lab, you want to let your colleagues know where you are in your project, what's been taken care of, what's been done, and where we are. And also, you want to share the parameters of your experiment in systematic ways so that's on record and that you can troubleshoot. And that just doesn't cut it, traditional pen and paper approaches. So here, what we started by doing was just simply taking snapshots um, with our cameras on our phones. But now, the problem then, of course, is that it's still not into your databases. Now you have a picture of all the parameters used in the experiment, but ideally you want those parameters put into a database. And um, with the iPads now, we can have software that basically allows us to quickly enter that information. For example, I use a tool called GoodNotes. Some people use Evernote. I've heard good things about Notion. And it's all software that really integrates many tools for note taking, pictures, drawing, um, messaging, even to some extent, into one nice place. And we can do this across devices like phone to laptop to workstations, but also across images. So, sorry, across uh, computational infrastructure and across individuals. So I can share information easily with the other my colleagues in my lab. Uh, it's cloud-based, which we're going to talk about today. So um, all the information is available to everyone, and that's a huge difference, right? Uh, Having that kind of infrastructure really made a change. So, the compute farm allows us to do really massive computations, okay, and provides us with now um, even very high levels of backup, okay. Uh, and our tablets, we don't really expect a lot of processing power, etc. Again, it's mostly audio, visual, and input. Okay. The other approach is through things like electronic assistants, Siri, Alexa, and we have something in our lab called Lab Twin running. It's really nice because it has this artificial intelligence language recognition system on it. So while you're in the lab and you have your gloves on and you're in the middle of a procedure, you can simply ask Lab Twin to read the protocol to you. You can ask Lab Twin to make a reminder or a note about something that you've seen. You can upload images that, as you're going along into the report, and those things are all again in the cloud, so they're shared amongst everybody instantly. So basically, you can uh, um, it's like having an assistant standing over your shoulder, and it means that you don't have to take off gloves, write things down on pen and paper, um, and take time out. So it makes everything a little bit more fluent. And again, all the information is instantly there for everyone. And I invite you to watch the movie on YouTube here. I picked this one. It's pretty short, and it gives a flavor for it. I don't have a nice example of it from our lab. It's still quite early yet. Okay. Another component that's really become important in modern labs is the idea of a 3D printer. So it's in itself is not really a computational item, yet it's heavily associated with computational infrastructure because you design objects in silico in the computer, and then you send it to a printer like this one here. This is what well, we're purchasing this one here, a different one currently. This is a do-it-yourself 3D printer for less than $1,000, so it's not an expensive investment anymore. And almost instantly it pays for itself. For example, we built this little Eppendorf stand. This is kind of the example of the software that we use. Google has something called SketchUp, okay, and there's other ones. And you design your 3D object, and then you can see here we print it out on the printer, and now that little plastic device for holding Eppendorfs with space for bead electronic magnets for certain things that we do in the lab are there, and it costs about $10 if in total, and a purchase like that from even a is pretty expensive. You'd be surprised at how much you would pay for that from a normal company. Um, it also the 3D printers also promote a very do-it-yourself open science mentality, and my lab's really into that. I'm really into that. Myself and guys like Lior Pachter at Caltech and many others, we share our 3D print, designs. Okay, we put them online, and that means that anybody else can download those prints and print out their own Eppendorf stand. In this case here, for example, in this image, um, we printed out um, a single cell capture device called the Poseidon system. And well, it's a little bit small, but I think if you zoom in personally, you'll see that all the components here of the system, almost all of them, is just plastic printed out by the 3D printer in about a couple days. And all those, each one of these stands, this is actually a clinical pump stand. Um, we have one, we have three of them in our lab, and they were about 1,200 US dollars each. Um, when we bought the electronic components and the plastic for this, I think it was about 20 bucks total. So that's a substantial difference, and it paid for the 3D printer already, just one of these three pumps. So it's hard to imagine not having that 3D printer anymore. In fact, a lot of our devices that we make ourselves for single cell sequencing and for um, uh, even microscopy these days, cell sorting, you can basically download computer plans for it and just print it out piece by piece. Okay, another audio-visual entity that's not quite in my lab yet, but it really is coming are things like Google Glasses. So although, I think the idea of Google Glasses failed at the societal level, I think we just weren't ready um, as people to have, individuals walking around taking video unnoticed along the street. In the lab, you could imagine that Google Glasses would be great for closely monitoring experiment as it's going along, and then you can troubleshoot maybe even better. And virtual reality equipment. So I own an Oculus. I bought the Oculus for my 9-year-old son last Christmas, and he never uses it, but I like it. I'm not sure I could work in it yet. The quality is not there for long periods, but definitely you can see how these goggles that uh, a lot of software is being designed for now could really be used to improve our interface with our computers. Okay, so all of this together, when you say, okay, now we have phones and tablets and assistants and printers and workstation servers, compute farms, it gets pretty expensive. Like notice here, actually, I don't really have a printer. We try never to use paper in the lab, um, except for printing out these barcodes. Um, so what do we do about that? Because it is actually expensive. And we can't expect that every prof is going to find the money to incorporate all this technology. So it's kind of like, as more things came out, it got more expensive. But, um, you know, you get stuck, right? Because you can't really, you don't want to, you want to be spending your money on reagents and kits and getting experiments done, um, and not on infrastructure to get that done, like computers. So how do you alleviate costs? And that really comes down to the cloud-based approaches, and that's what's made this world a difference. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit now about what is the cloud and try to understand, fundamentally this concept. But first, let's review what traditional computing is. Okay, and we'll use as an example a small collaboration between you, okay, and your colleague. Okay, so I don't care, you're working on your laptop or your workstation, doesn't matter. But what does matter is that your laptop has this hard disk, and on this hard disk, you have this file that you're working on together. Okay, so maybe this is a report or a manifesto or a novel or whatever it is, you're working on it together. And likewise, your colleague also has a disk, and a copy of that file is stored on their computer. Okay, so in the traditional approach, both of you start to work and you have what are called asynchronous updates. So it's you against Y. Okay, so let's suppose you modify the file like this here, okay, and now when you modify it at this time point, okay, so we're modifying it right at this time point here, okay, all right, this is time going down this axis here. You write world domination, our plan, buy weapons, buy Facebook, spread disinformation, 1, 2, 3, and you send the file to your colleague at this point here, and they receive it, okay? Now, that's fine, all right? Then they modify that file, okay? And they change it to say buy Facebook and TikTok, and they say buy lots of weapons, okay? So they make a couple changes to the file, and then at this time point, and they send it back to you at this time. However, in the meantime, as they were modifying, basically at the same time as you, they had made another change to their original file that said for um, get bad populist haircut. Okay, so now the problem is that when the file arrives back at you on your drive, it's inconsistent because now it has to be updated. It has in there the additions of and TikTok and lots of from your colleague, but you now have to re-add into here. You have to modify it to add in your statement 4, which is get bad populist haircut. So now you've had to reintroduce your change twice, and that's clearly not very good because if you made a lot of changes, it's annoying to get a file back from your friend and have to go through and integrate those changes back. Now, as you're adding in here 5 declare me ruler, your colleague Y is also adding into their file declare Y ruler. Okay, and now when you send the file to them at this time point here, they receive it. And when they receive it, they uh, find it's inconsistent and it's a conflict because it's inconsistent because they don't have your statements 4 and 5, so they have to add these two statements to their file. But of course, the other thing is that the fifth statement here is a conflict with what they wrote. So how do you resolve declare me ruler versus declare Y ruler? Okay, and so that's a tricky situation. So you have conflicts and inconsistencies in the classic approach, okay, by sharing files by, let's say, email between the two sites, right? And yeah, I should say that this is probably, in traditional ways, this would be by email, something that should be put to death forever now. We don't need email anymore. Okay, so um, actually, when you increase the number of collaborators on one project, the number of communication channels grows quadratically, meaning um, bad news. So uh, let's see, let's do this in a systematic way. So if I have 3 collaborators now, so I have me, Y, and Z, I have 3 lines of communication. I can either talk to Y or I can talk to Z, or Y and Z can talk to each other. And so everything on the previous slide, all of these conflicts that you see here and inconsistencies now can happen in all 3 of these different communication channels. And so when I make a change and Y and Z are making changes at the same time, when we start to send these files to each other, we have to integrate everybody else's changes. And that's going to cause lots of conflicts, right? And when I have 4 collaborators, I end up with 6 lines of communication. So you can start to see how this is going to be quadratic because I have 1, 2, 3 lines there. This person has 1, 2 lines, and this person has 1. So in total, we have 6 lines of communication. But, you know, it gets worse news because if I go up to N people in my project, and I think even in an academic lab, I might have 20 co-authors on a paper. Okay. When I have 20 co-authors on a paper, then how many lines of communication do I have that are independent? Well, let's see. I can speak to N minus 1 individuals, number 2, number 3, all the way up to number N. So I have N minus 1 lines from colleagues, myself, colleague 1, to all other colleagues 2 to N. Colleague 2 can speak to, well, we don't count again that colleague 1 can speak to me. We already counted that. But colleague 2 can speak to colleague 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to N. So there's N minus 2 lines of communication between colleague 2 to colleagues 3 to N. Colleague 3 can speak to colleagues 4, 5, 6 to N. So there's N minus 3. And the last colleague, colleague N minus 1, or second last, can speak to colleague N. And so that colleague N minus 1 speaks to colleague N. There's just one form of that. So I sum this, N minus 1 plus N minus 2 plus N minus 3 down to 1. And that sum is equal to N times N minus 1 divided by 2, or N squared minus N over 2. And the main thing here is this N squared, okay? That's really the main issue, is that when I have 20 collaborators, there's 160 lines of communication. And so that's just chaos when you're sharing files and information. That's not the way to run a project. And I think many of you have had this experience already, maybe not 20 colleagues, but at least in small groups working on coursework, etc. Okay, so they have their traditional approaches have their limitations and they don't scale well. So how do we fix this? Well, okay, here's one strategy. So let's assign somebody as the central broker. That's this guy here, okay? whose only job it is to keep track of the files. So I will never send my file to any, like to two or three or four, or anybody. I'll only send my file to the broker. Likewise, two, three, four, and N, they'll only deal with the broker. And the broker will send back information to these the file to each of these individuals. Okay, so now you'll notice that there's only n lines of communication, not basically n squared lines of communication. So if I have 20 colleagues, I have 20 lines of communication, and I need this broker. That's nice because that broker cuts down the lines of communication. Um, Now, the other issue that the broker will do, okay, the other duty the broker will have is to maintain one consistent copy of the file. So basically, every time I make a change and I send it to the broker, okay, every time I send it to the broker, all right, whoops, my marker's not working. Um, I can't use my marker right now. So every time I send to the broker updates her personal file here and resends the file to everybody in the team. Now, if I send a change and the broker is making a change to the file with my updates and number three sends a change, the broker will say, hey, wait a minute, you stand in line. And when the broker is finished updating my file, it'll send back the file to everybody. Then three, colleague three can send in their update. Okay, so the broker also will guard against conflicts or decide conflicts. So if both myself and colleague three um, want to change the same line of text, the broker will make sure that um, it's serialized, meaning whoever came first makes the change first. And the other person sees the result of that change before making a change. So when I write, for example, name myself ruler, then three won't be able to make a change until they've read that. Okay, so that number three will see that I'm saying make myself ruler, and then they'll be allowed to switch that to, well, no, make number three ruler. But then that information will be sent to me, and I'll be able to change it back to make me a ruler. So it's not going to change human nature, but at least it makes the playing field fair to debate that issue. Okay. Now, of course, um, do we really need a person to do that? And the answer is no. And that's what Google Drive did. So instead of having a broker that's a person who is basically doing this all the time, the project lead or something who would spend all of their time integrating people's information, we can computerize that, or at least that's what Google computerized. And so what they did is use their vast internet savvy along with their large um, databases and CPUs, and I'm going to try something here to see if I get there. It is, and try to they allow us then to store files at Google Drive, and they provide software that resolves all the inconsistencies and conflicts, and that's a huge advantage because now there's only one copy of the file on record and not n squared. Okay, there's no inconsistencies or updating by colleagues necessary ever, so we never have to go and put our changes back in. And nice things like we can roll back. So that's a fancy term for saying that if we don't like, for example, I don't like that colleague three says they're going to name themselves ruler, then I can revert the version of the file back to when it said make me ruler. So if I don't like how the document is going, I can see all of its history and pick and choose what I would like. Now, importantly here, the file is actually not on anybody's server, okay? So we can actually cross this out, okay? It actually doesn't really go to our machine. It is only stored at Google, at the company compute farm. So now, we see it on our screen through our browser, like Google Chrome or Safari or whatever you have. But that file is just an image. It's just a picture of the original file that's at Google Drive. Okay, so that file's only available via the web. Okay, so that's the concept of Google Drive. All right, and that's the fundamental concept of cloud storage and collaboration. Okay, so you also notice that by taking away the need of storing the software locally on your machine, it does lighten slightly the load on your hard drives and your need for memory. Because you're not storing large files, you don't need to have a ton of RAM. Google Chrome will just display the part of the file that you're looking at that moment. Okay, that's a big change. So now you're going to start to save money when you're buying infrastructure, either for your home use or for your company or for your lab. So another advantage is related to backup in the same way. Okay, so currently our traditional approaches, many people would back up their VR goggles, phone, laptop, workstation, and everything on their workstation, perhaps. And maybe then they would back that up to a local server, like let's say the backup services offered by Concordia. So you need then to either buy or have access to machines, or Concordia has to buy these machines, right? And they're substantial. And you need to have a workstation that's large enough to keep track of your data, okay? You can also buy small hard drives that are quite cheap these days to store that way too. A cloud approach instead just has these devices individually store to Google Cloud or to whichever other service that you want to pay for. And again, you make use of their large computational infrastructure in terms of processors, but mostly disk to house that data. And you pay usually a couple dollars a month for maybe 100, for a large amount, like a terabyte of data, if not more. So now really, um, you don't need to keep, the time to obsolescence for your devices should lengthen because, um, you know, you don't need your CPUs to be as powerful, and you don't need your drives to be as large because you're using the cloud to backing those things up and maintaining that kind of thing. And you'll notice that you're not going to be buying as much software and installing it locally. So there's lots of advantages. Another a reason that we'll see um, another advantage of cloud computing um, is the fact that you can have access to many CPUs, to many processors. So now we'll see examples of some of these ideas throughout the course, but for now, you'll just have to believe me that molecular simulations of protein folding or how ligands bind with receptors, um, uh, all sorts of detailed molecular modeling, or when you're doing statistical analysis of large data sets, like full genome, analyzing full genomes or expression data, etc. These require a lot of CPUs and a lot of disk space. Another example is models of climate and the environment, where you're trying to predict how a system is going to change over time, and there's a tremendous amount of computation in there. Even these days, a lot of gaming couldn't really be done on a local machine. We basically just download images sent to us by big central computing houses as the game goes along, especially for these massively parallel computing games that you see online. So traditionally, yeah, right, you need to buy large servers. Um, which that's a lot of money. Like, they can be, um, in the millions of dollars to get that kind of infrastructure together. So, and then you have to maintain that. You have to hire somebody to administrate it. It's very, very expensive. Now we just pay basically for what we need. Now, I think if you were to go back to the third slide of this talk and go through that list of all the issues with traditional computing, um, you can start to see how the cloud resolves many of those problems, right? Okay, so we really don't need as much infrastructure from in our labs anymore. Okay, so uh, yeah, so what do we do now? Um, Basically, we, for example, in my lab, we use our smaller server, so it doesn't have to be as big as what it used to have to be. We're just going to prototype, right? We're just going to get our model working. We're going to write, the minimal, use a small data set to show proof of principle, get it running, to get the bugs out of it, etc. And we can do that now on our local workstation and our weakened local server. Um, in fact, these days, why do we even need this workstation anymore? Now we just buy better monitors to hook up to our laptops, and that's sufficient really for prototyping our system. So we prototype locally on our workstations and servers, and then we turn to the cloud and we put our models there on their massive servers and CPUs and do it there. We pay per use type thing, and we can get as many processors. Um, we can fit the number of processors to our need. If we need 1,000 processors, we can pay for that. If we need 20, we can pay for that. So that's a that really changes how we spend our money locally and how we organize things. Okay, so the cloud computing paradigm, it's everywhere. We'll see here not very much of cloud computing per se, although I say that, but we are going to use our Studio Cloud, which um, is a cloud computing setting for R. There are other uh, commercial options out there like Google, Amazon, Microsoft that offer not just CPUs but also GPUs and TPUs. And these are, we'll talk a little bit about these things more in the course with machine learning. But in situations where you have a lot of numerical computation in a field called machine learning, in graphics, gaming, in simulation, there's certain types of processors that are optimized to do those mathematical operations blazingly fast. Um, yeah, that's what that says there. Okay. And they're becoming more and more common and ubiquitous in our day-to-day life. In fact, I understand now that perhaps Apple's going to start putting a GPU in each laptop, although I can't really confirm that. Okay, so you pay per use. Um, we use our studio in the course. Okay, so now let's summarize here. Okay, so traditional computing, um, we had to have a sizable server to meet those peaks where we really needed to do a lot of computational work. We needed really good workstations and, okay, laptops. Without cloud computing, we can add a lot of really fancy, nice things that really make a difference, including using compute farms, like cloud computing. That is basically what cloud computing is now. Tablets, etc., assistants. Um, but with cloud computing, a few things happen. Notice that the workstation basically disappears. One could ask whether we need workstations anymore. Instead, we just buy good monitors and hook them up to our laptops. And now we save a lot of money because this is really, workstations are very expensive. Our needs, our laptops don't change. The tablets add a bit of extra money, and as do the phones. But the workstations really, these are the expensive things. And the servers are also very expensive. But with better access to cloud computing, to the compute farms, we can buy smaller servers to prototype on. So all in all, we get all sorts of new gadgets, a lot of more power for probably the same price. So that's the way things go, I guess, right? Um, yeah. Okay. So, but what about software, right? The discussion um, to date has been about mostly about hardware. Although the cloud computing does have this broker, this computer broker, that controls, which is software that controls the updating and conflict resolution of documents. So for software, the cloud still reduces the cost too, because you're not typically buying as much software anymore. Um, Google, for example, offers really excellent software now that's for free. A lot can be downloaded for almost any application. And actually, as you guys become more proficient with computers and your IT skills improve, a lot of opportunities open up for you that, say aren't open for grandpa and grandma. Um, so there's a lot of free software out there that's very powerful. It's almost as good as commercial software that you buy, um, but it's not quite as usable, user friendly. So, but you don't need to get your skills up that much to start to make use of it. And you also save costs associated with the administrators installing and managing software. Okay, so and I think that it's important to point out again that uh, um, as you shift the computation to foreign servers, the cloud servers, you don't have to have as nice of computing equipment locally. I'll sketch a little bit about what my lab does in some of the software. Slack, which we're going to use in this course, is really key. It's far superior, this or any of its competitors, to email. Um, and I think that you guys are going to get to know Slack inside and out. I would say it's the one piece of software that changed my lab the most in the last 10 years. Um, there is a little bit more of an esoteric example of Google Colab. So Colab allows two or more people to sign in to, it's like Google Drive. You can write a document or a spreadsheet or make a presentation together on Google Drive. But how about programming? How do you program at the same time with the same file? And that's what Google Colab allows you to do. So it allows two or more people to basically write code together. And it would be great if we had that running for this course because, for example, the TA could program with you in the file remotely, especially in these COVID times. Unfortunately, Google Colab is not great with R. It's better for Python. And RStudio to date hasn't implemented that feature, but it's coming, right? And that's really facilitated by the cloud again. I should point out too, really, I need to point out is that these are all cloud, right? You know, the Slack is cloud-based because all of our messages don't reside on our computers. They're not emails sent directly between us. They're sent to a common server, okay? And everybody has access to that information in a centralized place. So if somebody asks a question once and somebody answers it, it's answered once, right? Not many times. Um, for document and literature management, we use Google Drive. It's great for documents, Google Docs, Google Sheets for spreadsheets, Google Slides for presentations. It has a Google Draw, and there's about 10 more tools there. Basically everything that you want for free, and there's lots of storage space for free there. And they're all cloud-based, so every one of those items can be worked on by multiple people at the same time. And you know, I assist my students writing papers every day in this way, and it's really great. All the changes are there; they're consistent. We can roll things back. And it's no matter where you go, what device you use, you have access to that information. Zotero is great for keeping. We find it great for keeping track of bibliographic references. A lot of people know EndNote because they're using Microsoft Word. Um, Zotero works with Google Docs, and that's one of the reasons why we use it. But it works quite well. Again, it's cloud-based, which means that my lab has a Zotero account. I'll show it to you right here. So this is what Zotero looks like. And this is my student Sandy's thesis, some of the papers from that. I can go into, for example, deep microscopy, and these are all the references that we found that we're interested in for one paper, etc. And everything can be synchronized, so if I push this little button up here, it comes in. In fact, I can enter new entries really easy. For example, if I type in something like Um, Let me see if I have a good example off the top of my head. I'm not sure that I do. Um, Let me just show you, for example, if I take um, this DOI, it's already in the database, but if I go up here and I type in that DOI, which is basically a web-based link to a paper, it will go and download it, and well, it's just entered that paper now twice into my system. But yeah, so now if I synchronized it by clicking on this button here, everybody else in the lab will have the same bibliography, and I can enter those into Zotero via Zotero into my Google Doc very easily. Um, Project and time management, for example. Okay, so yeah, especially with startup companies and large corporations, there's a ton of software out there for me for project maintenance. Um, so basically, you need to keep track of all the different gears in a project, what everybody has to do, meetings, deadlines, files, information, protocols, agreements, all that stuff has to be managed. Everybody needs to know what to do next, etc. And there's no shortage of software out there. There is a growing literature for project management software specifically for life science labs. And well, we use one called Trello sometimes. Some students use it. Trello is really nice. I think I may have a link to one here. I'm not sure. Maybe I have a Trello running. Let's see. Will this work? Okay, so um, let me quickly go to my Trello. Maybe where is my link to Trello? There it is. Okay, so maybe I'm logged in here. Whoops. Um, I'm not logged in. There we go. So different projects, for example, this one here called DropSeek. Um, I can come in and I can see that there's several people involved in this project up here listed. And these are like little sticky notes of all the things that we need to do uh, in the near future um, related to ordering and supplies, towards technological problems that we've addressed, um, you know, uh, debugging this or that, troubleshooting, communicating with our co-authors, etc. And so you can easily add another item, say, for example, order more BSA. Okay, and if I do that, I can add it. I can actually come in and say, you know, uh, let me edit the labels. I can change its color. I can do all sorts of things with like um, add notes to it. Let's see what else can I do. I can assign it to somebody. I can change the due date. For example, I can say it's going to be ready it needs to be done by August 20th. I can save that. Um, I can even assign this to individuals in the lab, although I don't see how to do this right now. Maybe it's change members. Yeah, for example, I could assign this to Sani in the lab, and that would be Sani's responsibility. I'm going to delete this right now because that's just an example. Oops, how do I delete it? Okay, well, not a problem. Anyway, that's Trello. Okay, so um, uh, we use that. Now, it has nothing to do with life science per se. It's pretty simple though. You could use it to plan a wedding, for example. Lab Scrum is more life science specific. We don't use it per se. I welcome you to follow the link, and you can check it out yourself. But it's more of a concept really than it is even software. It's an approach to organizing your thesis work and your paperwork, etc., and how to interact with your supervisor and your colleagues, etc. It looks nice, but we haven't incorporated that yet. Um, whoops. The third thing is Toggle, which some of you might find interesting, especially if you have problems organizing your time. Basically, Toggle, I don't have a nice example of it here, but it's easy to explore. Basically, when you're working on a project, you click a button to say, oh, yeah, okay, I've started to work on my reading, right? And then when you finished your daily reading of papers, you click stop. And then when you start to go into the lab and, you click start and it measures how long you've been in the lab until you hit stop, doom. And then, at the end of the day, you can see how many minutes were spent on each of your different tasks. And when you do this over months, you can see some interesting patterns in your behavior, especially if you're very honest in terms of stopping and starting the clock when you go and take a little mini break to look at social media, for example. I know a lot of people use it for consultants use it to keep track of to keep accurate records for billing, etc., of customers. Okay. Now, well, this will the idea of software development platforms will become a little bit clearer to you guys as we move along in the course. But basically, a lot of software these days is not developed by one individual, but by a team. Okay, that's just the fact of life, is that we often working in teams. And it's not easy to work in teams, right? Everybody needs to know what to do next, but also the same things when you're writing a paper on Google Drive. You need to have ways to resolve conflicts and to keep the documents consistent. And so, software development platforms are basically to software what Google Drive is to Word documents. Okay, so when you make a change, when somebody makes a change to the software, the system ensures that everyone has access to the same version. So consistency, and it also guarantees, like with Google Drive, that each person can view previous earlier versions of the software and develop their own branches of the system. So one individual can take the system and say, well, I want to move this in a totally different direction just to experiment. Maybe at the end of the day, all those changes I make to turn this my software into a personal lab system will be useless, so I'll delete it. But these kinds of development platforms allow you to sort of experiment. They serve as a sandbox that you can easily recover from when disaster occurs. Okay, this course uses GitHub to store all of the course. That's the slides, the notes, the assignments. Everything is in GitHub essentially, and that's what keeps things organized. And later on in the course, you'll have access to that. There's alternatives like Bitbucket, and we use that sometimes. They're basically the same idea, minor differences. They're competitors. Um, and yeah, we'll learn more about these things later. In fact, I'll just show you here that this is the Data Science 2020 GitHub repository. So all the files, lectures, video, everything is here at this one site. And um, well, I have software in our studio controls the way that I interact with those files to maintain this consistency and persistence in a nice way. That's a little bit more esoteric, and you'll see later on the value of such a system. Okay, and now we're getting near the end, but I really want to stress here that learning to program and learning IT in general, you need help, right? And you have to be a little bit egoless to reach out to people and ask questions because it can literally save hours of your time and frustration. You need to find your communities. And it's not just the person next to you at the desk, nor is it the TA, nor I. You have to become good at using the web to find what you need. And there's excellent communities out there, right? There's just really excellent communities of dedicated people doing it for free. Stack Overflow, trust me, every question that you'll have as a new programmer has probably been asked and answered on Stack Overflow. I don't think you can ask it like, what is the answer to Mike's uh, assignment 3 question 4 question, but you might be able to say, how do I solve this following problem that's related to assignment 3 question 4, and you might find something on Stack Overflow that's pretty close. You know, I welcome you to use those kinds of things because we all use those in research. It's not cheating to go out there and look for what's available information wise. That's actually a very valuable skill set that you need to learn. You do need to cite your sources though. And Stack Overflow is community driven, so the people out there do it for free and answer questions. Bioinformatics questions in nature. So Stack Overflow is mostly all IT issues in general. BioStars is more bioinformatics specific. So if you have a question about, what experimental design I should use for comparing three most models versus controls, or how do I set up an RNA-seq experiment properly? How do I do mass spectrometry on lipids, etc.? BioStars would probably be a good place to look it up, and you'll find people there with excellent technical advice. And then there's the RStudio community. We're going to use RStudio, or we're getting there. Next class, we're going to start. Um, the RStudio community um, is very nice people, and they'll answer questions about RStudio and its products. Um, Generally, I don't think you turn there for assistance with coding in R. It's more about RStudio, but it's very helpful sometimes. Okay, there are also some pretty cool things related to this idea of the Internet of Things. So, um, we have computers and cell phones, laptops, assistants, workstations, servers, all these things, right? And the question is, how well do they integrate with each other? And the cloud helps quite a bit, but what about other devices? And the Internet of Things is this attempt, or this direction or philosophy of putting everything online. When you have a Nest system that controls the temperature in your house, that's the Internet of Things, right? It's connecting your electricity and heating to your computer, to the web. And when expensive cars like BMWs, Mercedes, etc., um, those cars are capable of basically informing your mechanic when they detect trouble with the engine, and they may or may not inform you too, but they immediately send a message to the mechanic that can then schedule an appointment automatically to come in and fix whatever is wrong with the car because its sensor has picked up a problem. That's the Internet of Things. Uh, the lighting in your homes and these small little devices to control lamps uh, or utilities via your computer. That's the Internet of Things. Now, okay, that's coming, right? And our houses get smarter and smarter, and there's lots of good social economic benefit there. The lab, though, right? And it's happening in the lab too. And a lot of modern equipment that we're buying now is internet capable. They have inside of them, wireless, Bluetooth, and other devices. They can easily be plugged into the web. And one way, a nice software system out there is called IFTTT, or it's called If This Then That, and it allows you to build little rules that connect devices. So in one of the assignments, I believe you're going to try and connect um, a Google Drive document to your Slack um, account as a starting point. But um, the next time you're in your lab, I'd like you to look around and look at your devices and ask which of those would really be handy if it were online and controllable from your computer. Um, I guess and what kind of benefits would it have? If you could know when a routine is finished for a shaker or an incubator or a scanner, a microscope, if that could be reported automatically to you, it would free up your time to go and do other things, right? If your phone could get a message saying, yeah, this job is now done, transferring information to the lab's server. So take a look at IFTTT, but I think more when you're in the lab the next time, look around and ask, what would it take, and what would the advantage of getting all those machines hooked into the modern world. So that's the end of this lecture here. Next class, we're going to talk about some modern computing paradigms, what it means to be a computer, and get into the beginning of RStudio and R and look at our first steps of programming. Okay, thank you very much.